Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Established Run's NBA Injury Report Analysis Show. I'm Drew Dinkmeyer here with Mike Gallagher to walk you through a nice 8-game Wednesday slate. A lot of injury information already for this 8-game slate and a lot of big out tags to deal with. So we'll be talking through how those rotations look. We'll also talk through the questionable tags on the slate as well and any other injury information that we think you should be aware of. As always, all of the DFS style takes will come behind the paywall at 5 o'clock Eastern with myself and Gary Hartman. With that out of the way, Mike, how are you on this Wednesday?
Doing good. Good news, cashed Miami CLV yesterday, bet OKC +4. Bad news, rough props day, man. Miami stuck it to us another way. So looking to get back on the horse and rebound today for the prop streets. But yeah, lots of like. I think we got some edge. I think that there's a lot of ways I think teams are going to play that I think may not be so clear. So feeling pretty good about today.
Yeah. This industry will always keep you humble. Had a really good Monday night, really shaky Tuesday night from projections and a player take standpoint. Hopefully back on track on Wednesday night with $1 million up top on DraftKings for one of their NBA tournaments, $2,500 entry.
Are you playing?
I'm going to play a lineup.
Let's go.
Old school payout style, which is awful, meaning that the milli makers of the one that I won in 2014 was like $1 million to first and 100,000 to second, like just terrible drop offs. But there's not a lot of shots you get in NBA for this type of payout, so I'm going to take a stab tonight. But let's get into the injury stuff. Let's start. We start with questionable tags. Let's start. There's a lot of big names that have been ruled out already, so let's kind of start there. Let's start with DeMar DeRozan, who's not ruled out yet, but is listed as doubtful on the Bulls injury report. And he got injured last game. He said he's been playing through this injury for a little while, so it wasn't surprising to see the questionable designation and then the almost immediate downgrade. The only other injury note for them in terms of on the report is Alex Caruso is probable. They're going to be without Javonte Green. He's going to be out a while. As they just couldn't get him healthy. The lingering questionable tags. I think he's undergoing a surgery and going to be out a little while. Yeah. So let's get into what the Bulls look like with no Javonte Green, no DeMar DeRozan. What do things look like tonight against the Wizards for them?
Yeah. So the headlines, oh baby, Zach LaVine. But then after that, the next headline, I guess co-headline would be, I think Kobe White plays a lot. They're kind of short on wings. I think they're comfortable putting Zach LaVine and letting him try to slow down Kyle Kuzma with a little bit of size. And well, obviously this depends on if we're assuming everyone the Wizard size in. We'll talk about that in a second too, because there's so many moving parts here. But yeah, so I think Kobe White picks up a pretty good amount of playing time. They don't need the ball pressure here. They've got Ayo Dosunmu to really cover Monte Morris, and that's it. You could definitely just him on Kispert or Denny Avdiya or whoever. So I think Kobe White's in a pretty good spot here to pick up a lot of minutes. That would vacate a little bit more minutes for Dragic behind Ayo. Ayo's minutes floor would come up a little bit higher here as well. He would have more ball handling, losing DeMar, subbing in for Kobe, but it'll be Zach LaVine's show. And also it really helps Vooch too. The matchup will be either very good or excellent on that side for Vooch. So yeah, a lot of value on the Chicago side. In matchup that's been tough to peg. The Wizards defense has been a little bit spotty overall, but there's just big upside here, losing DeMar and all his usage coming off.
And so who's your expectation of who slides into the starting lineup here?
I think Kobe makes sense to start. Play small. You don't have to worry about big wings attacking you. Kyle Kuzma's fine. He's more of a shooter and guy who attacks closeout. So you don't really need someone to get in his way. So I think that they're fine just eating that there. If regardless of who starts, if the Wizards are smaller, that makes it.
I think Caruso is the other candidate. Would be.
I think if the Wizards are bigger, I think Caruso's a little bit more likely, but if the Wizards are smaller, meaning Gafford or KP don't play, then I think it's really likely Kobe starts.
Yeah. And I think the idea there, so the other thing that they could do, right, they could start Derrick Jones Jr. If they really wanted like length and athleticism and stuff, but the lineup would really struggle from a shooting perspective. And also it would screw up the front court rotation quite a bit. So I think most likely what you see here is Kobe or Alex Caruso start. You can basically have Adesumu play, full complement of point guard minutes backed up by Goran Dragic as the primary point guard there. You could have Kobe or Caruso. One's a starter, one's the backup two there. Almost all of Zach LaVine's minutes at the three there. You'd probably get some spillover into Caruso and Kobe White, going into the 3 minutes as well. And then Patrick Williams, the 4 minutes. Maybe he spills over a little bit to the 3. Derek Jones, but the backup 4. And then it should be, we've seen a lot of these situations where sometimes the Bulls have to go small in that second unit because they don't like the matchup with Drummond and they use Derek Jones Jr. They shouldn't be able to do that. It's going to be much harder to do that with these wing depth issues. So it should be Vucevic with Drummond straight behind in what should be a pretty clear 9-man rotation. I think the points of pressure are just whether Caruso or White starts, how much of their minutes spill over into the 3, how much of Patrick Williams' minutes spill over into 3. I think they feel more comfortable with the guards than with Derek Jones Jr. So I think it's more likely those guys that eat up a little bit more of those backup 3 minutes from Zach LaVine. But it's probably going to be a 9-man rotation here and fairly tight on the starters. We saw Zach LaVine get up to 42 minutes last game when DeMar was out. Okay.
And Zach's going to really be able to, his downhill game has really gotten a lot better on top of the improved shooting. Because when he's open, he's been lights out, but I expect him to really, break this defense down. So Zach's probably going to be one of the best players on the slate.
Why don't we just tackle the Wizards stuff while we're here?
Makes sense.
Because they do have a bunch of questionable tags on the injury report. They'll still be without Bradley Beal, but questionable on the injury report, Corey Kispert, Kristaps Porzingis, and Daniel Gafford. And we've noted before, this is a team that has a little bit better depth on the whole this year. So much depth, so much that Will Barton, who was the Nuggets' second leading scorer last year, is not even in the rotation. Shout out to Jokic carrying that team to nearly 50 wins. And so the thing is, though, they don't have a lot of front court depth. So if Gafford and Porzingis were to miss, things get really thin in a hurry. If Kispert misses, it's totally manageable. It's really not a big issue. They have plenty of depth there. But the scenarios get really bad if Porzingis and Gafford miss. If one of the two misses, I think it's still pretty manageable. What are your thoughts on the likelihood of these 3 players playing tonight, and walk through some of the different iterations of what lineup combinations we might see if some of them were to miss?
So the most likely player to miss here is Daniel Gafford. Roll his ankle. He was going to get reevaluated, whether they meant imaging or whatever. I'm not sure, but it sounds like he's got a decent chance to miss. He was the only guy Wes Unseld talked about after the game. Corey Kispert sounds pretty minor with a back injury. Rib contusion wasn't even bad when he got hit. I think he took a fall, popped up, and looked fine. We saw TJ Warren take a terrible one. He was back the next game. So feel pretty good about those 2 guys playing, but it's Porzingis, so we never really know. If Kispert's back injury is something which I don't really know much about, I would assume Denny Avdia gets to start there. He would be drawn the Zach LaVine assignment, which we kind of thought he was going to do with the SGA matchup last week. So I feel pretty confident that Denny would start there. If everybody's out, I think that's Rui Hachimura's music. I think he would be picking up a start. I think he'd be playing a ton. His minutes limit's been gone. We saw his minutes dip a little bit a few games ago, but it was just because of poor play. So I think he would benefit. And then if it's he might start if even just one of them are out. Or they might go back. They might go up to Denny too. I think they would probably start Denny and pick up the. So that would be a starting lineup if one's out of Monty Morris, Corey Kispert, and I'm assuming Kispert in this situation, Denny Avdia, Kyle Kuzma, and then one of the centers.
Right.
So I think that kind of covers most of that.
And in any of those scenarios, if one person is out, I think Will Barton is next man up in terms of the rotation. It's still just going to be bench minutes, filling bench minutes, but I think he's kind of the next guy up. If both Gafford and Porzingis are out, what do you think the lineup looks like there? Do they go to Taj Gibson to try to match Vucevic minutes at best they can? We saw this sort of last night with Detroit, where they were without all their centers. The broadcast on Detroit even mentioned that they think the plan was to match Nerlens Noel minutes to Joel Embiid. They did that most of the game, and then the third quarter things just were so off the rails that they were like, we'll just let the guys we want to develop play. But do you think that would be the approach here with Taj Gibson essentially starting as the center, maybe still Avdia starting at the 3 or the 4, depending on how you view him and Kuzma, and then Rui as like the main bench piece that could be like small ball center second unit?
Yeah, I mean, we saw them start Taj Gibson over Daniel Gafford against Jokic
Right.
earlier in the season, which goes to show that Wes Unseld likes Taj for post defense. So I think it's pretty obvious that he would get the start if they're both out.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
if
and
they're
under the
if it's just Gafford, I think they would still start Porzingis, but just because I think I'd be a little
yeah,
bit more
I
concerned
agree.
with Gafford. Yeah, I'm
I
sorry,
agree
with Levine.
totally. Yeah, I agree totally. So I think if any one of these guys is out, just one, we think Denny Avdia is most likely to slide in the starting lineup, and Will Barton is
Mhm.
most likely to slide into the rotation. And when two guys get out, especially if they're the two bigs, I think things change because then Taj Gibson probably slides in alongside Denny Avdia, would be our guess.
Mhm.
Rui Hachimura off the bench in small ball center second units, I think.
Mhm.
And that would be a really good spot for production for Rui Hachimura because
Yeah.
I mean, defensively, like I don't know how the Bulls would try to match up there. Maybe
Mhm.
they could hide Drummond on somebody else in the lineup, but it would be a really tough spot for Drummond to hang defensively. He would also be in a great spot to punish them on the boards in the second units as well. So a
Mhm.
couple moving parts here to pay attention to. Wanted to tackle all that while we were on this game.
Yeah,
Let's move
first game of the
over.
day too, so you guys will be able
Yeah,
to run through it. We'll have projections for the DFS show while
yeah.
John and I'll be working on that.
Trey Young was this was a quick midday downgrade from Q
Ugh.
to out with the illness stuff that seems to be hitting the league in a meaningful way. So no Trey Young against Milwaukee tonight. They're still without Clint Capella. How does this impact what you would expect the Hawks to be running against Milwaukee tonight?
Yeah, I feel very confident they'll be starting AJ Griffin in the spot, moving DeJounte Murray to a very ball dominant spot. Drew Holiday and him will be guarding each other. Yeah, so I think that's pretty straightforward. And you're talking about a lot of minutes ceiling. We're seeing DeJounte, Hunter, even a Congo at times, even Collins sometimes more than usual, playing a lot of minutes here. So those guys would be in interesting spots. DeJounte, it's you see the Drew Holiday matchup is bad. Who cares? He's going to just be pick and rolling to death. Talked about this a lot 2 days ago when I was loving Jalen Brunson for the same reason. So I think DeJounte's in a really, really strong spot. He'll get a lot of offensive volume. And against the defense, it's giving up a lot of pace. I think they're 29th in half court frequency allowed, meaning teams are playing really fast against them. So really good DeJounte spot without Trey. I think AJ Griffin could play. Um, I think they like Bogdan off the bench. I felt pretty confident in AJ Griffin, but now thinking about it, they may just run Bogdan off the start. What's your take on that one?
So I think they're more likely to start Bogdan than AJ Griffin,
Hmm.
just to have a second source of offense.
Yeah,
If
that's
they
probably
set
right.
this up in a way where it's AJ Griffin, DeAndre Hunter, John Collins, and Okongwu, there's only one guy that can dribble and break down the defense at all. And I
Hmm.
think they generally would like to have two as much as they can on the floor. I think they would then stagger, into the second unit, one of DeJounte or Bogdan with like an Aaron Holiday, who they feel like can maybe fill that role a little bit, and then have sort of the floor spacing from AJ Griffin in the second unit. So
Hmm.
that would be my guess. But we'll see. And Bogdan's a guy that can execute pick and rolls as well. So if they wanted to start picking apart matchups, which is a little bit tougher to do because Milwaukee's a pretty solid defense on the whole,
Hmm.
they could flip some of those matchups with DeJounte. But it should be a really ball dominant spot for him. And Milwaukee's done a really good job at closing off the 3-point line and closing off shots around the basket. As you've alluded to, they've become just kind of this mid range funnel. So if you've
Hmm.
got the mid range game like Jalen Brunson does or did, it's not a bad spot. DeJounte's got a little bit of that mid range game. He's really the only guy in the Hawks that does. So
Hmm.
so should be a good spot for him. But yeah, that's kind of
Yeah,
how I would.
I'm looking at the who he has started. They went with that super small ball lineup with Collins at the 5 that one game. Um, and then they have that's the only time they've never really started Bogdan in like a traditional kind of a lineup. It's always been like
Yep.
matchup based. So like based on that, that's why I was kind of thinking Griffin, but thinking through it more, I think it makes maybe a little more sense to go with it.
Yeah, we'll see. This is also it's also one of the earlier starts, right? It's a 7:30 start. Yeah, so
Hmm.
we should also probably have this information before lock. Nothing really to talk about on the Bucks side of this game. While we're here, there's not even the probable tag listings for the Milwaukee guys, so it's just Serge and Chris Middleton out. So things should be okay on the
Should
Milwaukee side.
mention that Drew's minutes were pretty full. Almost got to
Yep.
34 despite picking up
With
three
with
first quarter
three,
fouls.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So
And hit huge shots down the stretch. We'll note his ball handling has been cut though. Even with the minutes dip factored into it 2 games ago, he's losing ball handling. He's number 2 on the team behind Giannis. Giannis has really picked up ball handling. It's actually hurt his rebounds. His rebound chances have been cut by about 5 per game, just from a rebound chance standpoint in the last 2. So something we're kind of watching there. But we'll check it. Matchup should be up. I got more notes on that.
Will be interesting against an Atlanta team that's really struggled to rebound the ball a lot of late. Let's stick with the outs. Let's go to Detroit, which, they're on the second night of back-to-back. They did just file before we came on here. Bojan Bogdanovic was not on the injury report, which is good news for them.
Probable.
Yeah. He's listed as probable. Isaiah Livers also listed as probable. Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duren both listed out. So some of the same issues that they had last night with just a lack of big man depth overall. We saw Nerlens Noel start. Some of that dictated by the matchup with Joel Embiid, certainly. We also saw a couple things. One, they are more than willing to play Hamidou Diallo as basically a backup center. They were having him be the screen setter and roll man and pick and rolls. They were having him play the center position as a backup center. And once the game got out of hand, they weren't going to extend Nerlens Noel's minutes whatsoever. I do think if that game was competitive, I think Nerlens Noel had the chance to play upper 20s and sort of get closer to matching Joel Embiid, because they really felt like there's nothing that they can do here in terms of, like, you can't put Hamidou Diallo on Joel Embiid. So the matchup tonight is important to note. They're going up against Rudy Gobert in Minnesota. Not the same type of threat from a post-up consideration standpoint. And I would also note that, like, Noel, if you've watched Noel a lot over the years, which I have because I was a really big fan of Nerlens Noel, he played last game with his hands up. So he was so focused on not drawing fouls. So they had specifically told him, like, listen, you cannot get into foul trouble against Embiid because we don't have anybody else that can guard him. Because he was just like, he's usually really active with his hands. He was just like leaning back and trying not to foul at all costs. He still picked up 3 because Embiid's just a monster. But that was really noticeable to me that had to have been something that was specifically coached.
100%. And they left him open. He was shooting, even not even 20. They were 13, 14 footers. Like easy shots for Embiid.
Yeah. And so I think against Rudy Gobert, there's less of these concerns for playing small. Like Hamidou Diallo is. While he's small, he's got incredible athleticism and really, really good verticality. So some of the things that would concern you about Rudy Gobert offensively can be mitigated by some of the verticality ability of Hamidou Diallo. I think Noel clearly starts here, but I would expect Noel's minutes to be modest tonight. Would expect them to be low mid 20s again. I don't think it's the same type of ceiling as the matchup with Embiid, which got mitigated by the blowout situation. What are your thoughts on how Detroit is impacted tonight?
Yeah, pretty much covered the Noel thing. I agree with you there. And sub pattern wise, we saw kind of Saddiq Bey come out and then come back in when Noel was subbing out. So they were using him sub pattern wise as a center. He's obviously going to start today. Would expect Bojan to slide back into Kevin Knox's spot. Curious to see if that affects the rotation a little bit. Maybe where Knox is subbing in, kind of basically behind Noel, something along those lines. But yeah, pretty straightforward. I think you kind of nailed it. I think Bojan should be good. This is pretty clear indication that they were just managing him in a back-to-back, getting a probable tag. It's kind of a wear and tear thing from what I'm gathering. So could be. He's playing a lot too. We saw Bojan playing mid 30s frequently with more ball handling, in a matchup where they allow shooting. The Wolves just give up so many unguarded catch and shoot 3-pointers. So that's if Bey plays a lot, and I don't think Bey's minutes are going to come down. With Bojan back. So the perimeter shooters here could be interesting, especially if, although I should add Bojan's probably picking up McDaniels. I would expect him to pick up that matchup. So it's kind of sneaky for Saddiq Bey. I think he's still going to play a ton here.
Yeah, and they showed a willingness, obviously, last night. You see the minutes on the young guys that they were willing to fire at. Kevin Knox, 33 minutes. Saddiq Bey, 34 minutes. Those guys played deep in a blowout. Didn't really make a huge impact from a fantasy perspective last night, but it's good to know that ceiling is there in case the game goes awry. You saw Burks was managed, held down to 21. Magruder got up to 24. Corey Joseph was playing in garbage time. Diallo played a decent bit of garbage time as well. There were a lot of wing minutes available without Boyan last night that are coming away. So just be aware that the minutes ceiling for a lot of these guys, and obviously they won't have the 12 road-in minutes of garbage time that we saw last night either. So, but let's stick with that matchup. They're playing Minnesota, and Minnesota does have one of the bigger questionable tags on the slate. Anthony Edwards is listed as questionable. They are, of course, without Karl-Anthony Towns. The only other notes on the injury report there, still without Jordan McLaughlin, and Luka Garza is available from the G League. What are your thoughts on Anthony Edwards' availability tonight with that left hip soreness?
Should be good. I mean, we've seen this listed with this questionable tag for a while. He's kind of unlikely to play on Monday or Sunday, and he's been fine. So I'd expect him to play pretty full minutes. Roll's been really good. He's been playing more pick and roll ball handling. His ball handling itself has been up a little bit. Minutes have been huge. One thing that's interesting that may be a coincidence or not is the rebounding has gone down really since he had that big fall in Milwaukee when he hurt his hip initially. So I wonder if that's like affected him, like, oh no, I got hurt, because he was really crashing boards.
Yep.
So that's just something, I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but when I was looking at the box scores, it was like, oh, it's pretty clearly that's a good theory on it.
It could be. It also could be Rudy's been playing heavier minutes of
That's
late
true
as
too,
well,
yep.
which is another big component of that. It's still weird to see 38 minutes from Rudy Gobert and only 11 rebounds. Just been a down year all over the place for Rudy. Shifting back to the doubtful and outs.
One thing to add really quick, I just want to add on Gobert. He's touching the ball a lot. I was digging in on some front court touches. He is at 34 per game in his last two. So a small sample, but that's up from 23 and change. So significant touches coming to Gobert right now. They're getting more comfortable with establishing him on offense. So,
which is interesting. I think. Yeah, which is interesting if you take this matchup against a team that only has one center that can't play a ton of minutes. The ceiling for Rudy Gobert could be pretty interesting tonight. Okay, back to the doubtful tags. Herb Jones got the doubtful tag. They are without Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson once again. So a lot of usage for CJ McCollum and Jonas Valanciunas if they're able to capitalize on it. Matchup with the Celtics is not the best one. We'll see, how difficult it is. They have a couple key defenders on the injury report as well that we'll talk about in a second here. But what's your expectation for how the Pelicans rotation shakes out in the absence of three front court players now, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, and Zion Williamson?
Should almost certainly be Dyson Daniels getting the start and drawing the Jaylen Brown assignment. I would expect Najee Marshall to start and draw Jason Tatum. So we're having a starting lineup of CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy, Najee Marshall, Dyson Daniels, and obviously Jonas Valanciunas getting the center spot. We've seen a little bit more Jose Alvarado minutes as almost like a combo guard, and it's actually been affecting CJ McCollum's touch time. His touch time hasn't really altered. You would think that without Ingram, without Zion, we saw a lot of points Zion, that his touch time would come up to like 8.5, 9 minutes. It hasn't. It's been like 6 and change, which is pretty light for a guy that has, I think, 32 usage rate each of the last 2 games. He's been chucking away. But it's been he's almost been playing like a shooting guard role. So, but yeah, big spot for CJ. I think that they may really force him. We talk about the Celtics being a mid-range funnel, 29th in frequency. So against Valanciunas, who also could be capped a little bit. We know that the Celtics have so much ball handling, and so many teams love to run switch heavy schemes here that it's like a really bad spot for Valanciunas, in my opinion. Because I think Larry Nance could like really play a lot here. So it could be a very, very like if CJ shoots well, and we saw him light up D'Anthony Melton, right? Like it's very similar to me. Like I didn't go into detail, but like talking through it now, it's one of those. It's like the Brunson spot. Like, oh, it looks so bad, but like if he is going, he could really, really put up a big number.
Yeah, volume often can trump matchups. In this case, there could be a lot of volume for CJ McCollum. And as you noted, Larry Nance not listed on the injury report at all. He's had like these probable tags after kind of coming back from the latest injury. This could be one of those nights that Larry Nance gets up to 25, 26 minutes because otherwise Joe Val is just going to get hunted on switches and screens, and they can play the drop really aggressively and try to do that, but that just leaves a lot of mid-range jumpers open for Tatum if they go that route. So down a lot of key defensive pieces and options here for New Orleans going into Boston. It's just a tough spot. On the other side,
I mentioned I like Jaylen Brown a lot today in matchups. I think that getting Dyson Daniels on the other side against a team that allows a lot of 3-pointers as well, I think it sets up as a pretty sneaky. His price is up in DFS, but I think Brown kind of has a big game today.
On the other side, the two questionable tags we noted that are important here to monitor for the Celtics, Marcus Smart and Robert Williams, the man we call Time Lord, both listed questionable here. The two most important defensive pieces for this Boston Celtics defense. What is your read on their availability tonight? Left knee contusion for Marcus Smart, and then the just general knee maintenance for Robert Williams here.
Yeah, Time Lord's straightforward. They're on the front of a back-to-back. They get the Nets tomorrow. So you would think that they're going to probably sit Time Lord out today for the huge game on TNT tomorrow. So I feel pretty good about that. Marcus Smart, a little unclear. I think it sounded like he's a little bit dinged up. So I would think he's probably be game time, but I think he's got a much better shot to play than Time Lord does. So they would, if he does start, they would probably go back to their small ball lineup of Marcus Smart, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Al Horford in the first unit. But mostly good. And then if not, then if they're both out, then they probably go to Grant. My God, Grant! This completely slate breaking game from him. So
he was great. The back to back note I think is really important there because not only is Robert Williams more likely to potentially sit on this front end of the back to back, manage him for the matchup tomorrow. They don't play Al Horford in back to back, so I think it's pretty clear that one of these guys is playing one night and one of the guys is playing the other night, and then they'll figure out what they need from like the Blake Griffin, Luke Cornett type guys in terms of filling out minutes. But it makes total sense in the world that they split up these injury situations. And we see Robert Williams on the injury report. We don't see Al Horford on the injury report right now. So I think it's pretty likely that Robert Williams is not a go tonight. Okay. Let's move on.
Do you think Grant starts? Do you think they go to if everybody's out? Do you think they go to Pritchard this time? Because we saw Pritchard start 2 times ago when Smart was out. They didn't start him last time.
Yeah, I think the Pritchard stuff, his minutes, I think would be more likely to match with Alvarado. So I think it's unlikely that he starts in that scenario. I think it's more likely that Grant Williams gets the start there. But that's just kind of my inclination and my lean. It's a little bit different here because a normal iteration of the Pelicans, I'd feel very confident in Grant because there's a lot of size and a lot of wing scoring and forward scoring, which is primarily how they use Grant Williams, which is one of the reasons last game against the Bulls, I originally thought Grant might start because of DeMar DeRozan. Like I thought he'd get the DeMar DeRozan assignment, and they ended up going Time Lord. They ended up kind of flipping everything around a little bit. And then DeRozan gets hurt mid-game and Grant still explodes. But I think against the Pelicans, they're a little bit the current iteration of the Pelicans, they're a little bit smaller on the whole, but it's smaller in the second unit stuff. So I think Grant would more likely draw that start. Obviously, it's very clear they like Brogdon off the bench. So he's out of consideration for that. Okay. We've cycled through the doubtful and the out tags. We've gone through a couple of the questionable spots. Let's circle back on some of the other big questionable tags. RJ Barrett is one I want to touch on for the Knicks. This like hand issue that he had been dealing with. I want to talk through not only kind of the return timeline and how things impact, but we've seen without RJ Barrett, we've seen the Knicks play pretty well. We've seen the offense really, really concentrate on Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, who have been exceptional. If Julius would have just stopped shooting a little bit, I think they win this game easily against Milwaukee. But 1 for 12 from 3 and 9 for 29 was just a disaster. We've seen the minutes really concentrate. We've seen Emmanuel Quickley and Deuce McBride and Quentin Grimes. We've seen these guys go to straight spot up shooters. I mean, there's almost no ball handling from these guys whatsoever. And the ball is just in Brunson and Randall's hands all the time. So my question to you is, do we see RJ Barrett back tonight? And if we do you think the recent performance of Randall and Brunson impacts what our expectations should be of this Knicks offense going forward? Do you think that adjustments will be made? And is Barrett's hand going to impact his ability to carry the normal usage rates that we've seen from him in the past?
I think he's back. We saw him practice over the weekend, and there was a little glimmer of hope that he could return. And I was a little surprised they listed him as doubtful. So I'd be pretty surprised if he's not going to play, given the practice time and the timeline that was given. So I think he's certainly back. On top of what you said, Emmanuel Quickly's been playing pretty well for them. Even just from a defensive standpoint, he's been like okay. So, he obviously starts, but I'm curious to see if he doesn't have it, if he's missing shots, if he's off rhythm. We saw him earlier in the year when he was dealing with an illness, lose minutes to Quickly. I'll never forget the Denver game when Gary Hartman was like, "Yo, bet Barrett live. He's not looking good," and I did. It was an easy catcher, but yeah, so the next part, so I think he starts. I think he has a pretty good floor. I'm unclear on how this affects his shooting with the hand laceration, keeping him out that long. It's a very long timetable for that injury. Secondly, yeah, Brunson. Oh my God. Since RJ went down, leading the league in drives. I think he was first in touch time prior to the last game. He had a huge game. I assume he still is. I didn't check the stat on that. So he has to come down. He literally has the best role in the NBA since RJ went down. So I would expect his minutes to come down in a matchup that's not that great. I actually put him in the bad matchup category for matchups today, which I felt gross about. Oh, got a Kevin Huerter illness, another illness, man. These illness things. So yeah, and then Randall. I think Randall's matchup's a little bit better, so I think he could maybe get it going against Indy. Should mention Brunson has Andrew Nembhard against one of the best pick and roll defenses in the NBA. So. Yeah, it's kind of all gone bad for Jalen Brunson, who is just so hot right now.
A couple notes. The laceration to the index finger for Barrett is on his right hand, so it's his non-shooting hand. But still, I have some concerns that it could impact not only the playing time that we've seen because Quickly's played so well, but just kind of rhythm and like you use your right hand a lot, like still use your hands a lot, even if it's not your dominant hand, in terms of like creating space and catching the ball and being aggressive and stuff. So I'm a little bit concerned. I think there's a chance that Randall and Brunson, they're obviously not going to hold all of the role that they had without RJ Barrett, but I'm wondering if they hold more of what they had before than with RJ Barrett. And I think there's a chance, especially early on, if RJ Barrett gets needs to get into his rhythm, and if RJ Barrett loses minutes, because what we've seen is very clearly that Quickly is cool playing the spot up role and not having the ball in his hands a bunch. RJ, that has not been the role that RJ has played whenever he's been out on the floor for the Knicks the last few years. So something to keep an eye on there with the Knicks elevated price tags in a matchup against Indiana tonight. On the other side of that Indiana game, TJ McConnell and Aaron Nesmith are both questionable, as is Trevlin Queen, who's been questionable on the injury report for like 18 straight days with the G League assignment. What are your thoughts on the availability for TJ McConnell and Aaron Nesmith and how this could impact things on the Indiana rotation?
Yeah, kind of a lot of moving parts here. It sounds like, I mean, it's an illness for Nesmith. Got listed yesterday, which is something we feel a little bit better about than these midday downgrades. Like look at Trae Young, gets midday Q downgrade. Very quick. He's out minutes later, which has been. We need to start tracking this. How often are those midday Q tags out? Because I feel like it's every single time. But like I said, I think Nesmith has a better chance to play because he's been listed and dealing with it earlier in practice. So I think he's got an okay chance to play. If he does not, matchup's very important to note here. We saw them go with Jalen Smith earlier in the year, lost that job against Julius Randle. Probably want the size out there. They may go to O'Shea Brissett, who's been playing well. So I don't have a strong lean there. I almost want to lean Brissett because they just deaded Isaiah Jackson. So I think bringing Brissett in the lineup, his physicality makes sense. Are you with me on that Brissett would move into the starting lineup?
They seem to like him as a defender, so yeah. I think that's probably right. Duarte's too small. I mean, this role, whoever it is, this role would be taking on Julius Randle. So I think Brissett makes the most sense from a size perspective. Jalen Smith, they seem to have identified like he's a center, and that's why they've deaded out Isaiah Jackson and allowed him to play some in the G League, I guess. But I think that's right. They are thin in terms of front court bodies, though, that they feel comfortable with. The other thing you could see, I mean, you could see them like revive James Johnson from the dead and into rotation tonight as well, because teams usually like him in that kind of role as like a defender against scoring fours. But I think Brissett is most likely to start in that scenario.
I wouldn't honestly be shocked if it's Ben Mathurin. They've used Andrew Nembhard on Pascal Siakam, Kawhi Leonard, like huge dudes. And they may just be like, okay, guard Julius Randle. I think that's a stretch, but just something I wanted to throw out there.
If they did do that, would you be more excited about the Brunson spot if you saw Mathurin in the starting lineup?
100%. Because you're not putting Buddy Hield on him. You're not putting you're clearly putting
Okay.
Nembhard on him. So yeah, I'd feel way better about that.
Cool.
And should mention too, if McConnell's out, that's another reason to think Nembhard's minutes could really get higher. Buddy Hield could play a lot. The Knicks gave up so many jumpers. I think he hit 5 3-pointers in the last matchup. This is one of the best buddy spots out there. So just to add that.
They've been playing a little tighter on the whole. You can see only 4 minutes from Duarte and only 9 from McConnell last game. So that's essentially a 9-man rotation with the 9th spot split between two guys. So if they were to lose 2 rotation pieces, McConnell sort of a rotation piece, things could tighten up. I don't think we'd see the 8-man, but if you just look at like guard and wing depth, there's not a lot there. Most of their depth, you see all those backups, they're all really 4s and 5s. So it's something interesting to keep an eye on there. Okay, Keldon Johnson and Keita Bates-Diop, both questionable for the Spurs, who are going to be without Devin Vassell till potentially after the All-Star break. What are your thoughts on how the Spurs rotation looks tonight? And if we see Keita Bates-Diop and Keldon Johnson able to go in this matchup against the Grizzlies team, that will be getting Ja Morant back, who's not listed on the injury report today.
Yeah, so we've seen Keldon miss a few games with this hamstring injury. Worth noting, this is not the same hamstring injury that he hurt last month that cost him some time. That's a definite positive. And I saw a tweet while we were talking about Keldon. Let me hit the Keita Bates-Diop stuff while I do that. So Keita Bates-Diop looked fine. Don't know what happened to him. We had an over on him and looked like he was going to come back in and didn't. So he may have just tweaked something, new injury there, but certainly looks minor. I think he's going to play. And then Jeff McDonald he's covered the team forever. He was saying something about Keldon being a little bit unlikely. Trying to find, there we go. Stayed late after shooting around this morning to put in extra work. If I'm guessing, I'd say he misses his 3rd game. So he's just guessing. But I trust him, and it's a hamstring thing. He's listed with, I believe, tightness. So that's not usually too alarming, but it's the Spurs. Kind of think he's out. So would probably imagine KBD, if he could go, gets a start.
If not, where do you think they go? They seem to like Josh Richardson as like their backup. Yeah, if they're both out. They seem to like Josh Richardson as sort of like their backup point guard. I could actually see them going to Zach Collins in the starting lineup because of the matchup with Memphis's bigs. McDermott, they just seem to never really start. They seem to really like him off the bench. Josh Richardson, they seem to like off the bench as like a secondary ball handler behind Trey Jones. Malachi Branham, I think they prefer off the bench. I think they kind of want him to continue garnering confidence against second units a little bit more. So maybe Stanley. Maybe Stanley could slide into the starting lineup.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, they do have some front court depth with Isaiah Roby and Gorgie Zhang that they could lean into if they wanted to start Zach Collins there. But Stanley would make sense too in that spot as well.
If I remember correctly, they started Roby in his place initially when Keldon got hurt, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Kind of bigger. So yeah, maybe it's. I would say it's. I'd probably say Roby would be my first guess.
Okay.
Roby and then Stanley, then Zach. I don't. Then Richardson, I guess.
Yeah.
I'd be pretty surprised.
Cool. So we're on the same page that we think Richardson, McDermott, and Branham are preferred in the second unit.
Yeah, I'd be pretty surprised there.
Okay, cool. And then we noted Ja Morant back on the other side of this game. Brandon Clark is still out. They've gotten really good minutes from Xavier Tillman, so I don't see any reason to continue to back away from that. Obviously, the front court smashed last game without Ja Morant. It wasn't necessarily Desmond Bane who really benefited. It was the bigs, Jaren Jackson and Steven Adams having big games against this depleted San Antonio front court. Any other notes you want to drop on the Memphis side of things?
Gonna miss Tyus Jones. Tyus Jones is insta smash whenever he starts. I expect it's just a thigh soreness thing. So I think Ja's in a pretty good spot. We know this defense is a disaster. You just need to cross your fingers that they can hang in. And my God, this is just such a juicy matchup. We'll see if Steven Adams minutes get elevated again. Should note Zaire Williams has been kind of running hot here. He's been picking up even a little bit of ball handling, off misses and stuff like that. So looks to be way ahead of the rotation. He's clearly iced out Roddy and Jake LaRavia. And just want to note Jaren Jackson block party. Holy crap, man. 25 blocks in his last 6 games, 4 and change per game. He's just think he's at 3.3 per game on the year. He is completely deading my 150-1 Brook Lopez tickets right now. But yeah, big mismatch. A team that doesn't have a lot of jump shooting versus a team that locks down the paint. So we thought this would be a blowout the last game, but Spurs hung in. Spurs played really tough basketball. So we'll see if they can do it again. I have my doubts.
Yeah, really, really making a good case to be the most impactful defensive player in the league right now, Jaren Jackson.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's hit the Nuggets. Bruce Brown and Bones Highland both listed with probable tags. Any concerns there for the Nuggets tonight? Who get the depleted Suns, who we will talk about here in a second.
Yeah, no. Just a little hand thing for Bruce should be good to go. New thing for I think Bones. Oh, Bones may have gotten the thigh bruise when he had the meme when he looked over to the camera. What a great moment for Bones. But yeah, this should be good to go. Very little concerns there.
Okay, and then let's talk through the Sun stuff. They are on the second night of a back-to-back. Last night they were without CP3, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and Landry Shamet. It was a skeleton crew, but that's all they needed to go into Golden State and beat Golden State down with Steph Curry back. Really the third consecutive embarrassing loss for the Golden State Warriors as they continue to struggle now. The Warriors of the road have appeared at home the last 3 games this year. But you saw huge minutes from Mikal Bridges last night. Torrey Craig and Dario Saric did a great job in the front court. They went small even when they don't have as many weapons to do so. They played just 40 combined minutes between Biyombo and Jock Landale at the center spot. Will be tougher to do that tonight against Nikola Jokic. But what are your thoughts on availability for the Suns? You can start with the big 3 and then work your way to Shamet as well.
Yeah, so Chris Paul didn't travel the team to San Francisco. Would assume he's not joining mid-trip. I'd be shocked if he's playing. DeAndre Ayton, I would be fairly shocked if he's playing. Minor left ankle injury, but I did some digging on all the left ankle injuries he had. It is insane. So he had the one he just had. He had one last month. I lost my notes there. He had another one in October of this year. He had another one in March of 22 of this year. This is all left ankle. He had another one in 2020, and then he had another one in his 2019. All left ankle injuries. So this man, he needs to have the Steph Curry new ankle braces apparently because he can't keep his ankles healthy. So I'd be surprised if he plays. On top of that, we saw Jock Landale was supposed to start, and he even said he thought he was supposed to start, but they had a lineup mixed up, and he wasn't starting. I would be pretty surprised if Biyombo doesn't start and get the Jokic assignment there, and he may play a lot here. Landale is not a post defender, so Biz could definitely get there. It's a terrible matchup, obviously, but if he plays and avoids fouls and rebounds a little bit, gets a couple putbacks here and there, could grind his way to a double-double. So I think Biz is a good spot. Landry Shamet asked to play yesterday and did not, presumably because it was a B2B, so expect him to start. Should note also that Mikal Bridges picked up point guard minutes here, I believe for the first time in like a while where there wasn't a secondary ball handler. It was like Torrey Craig, Josh Okogie, Dario, and somebody else, not ball handlers. So he was bringing the ball, running the offense, and lit it up, man. I mean, he was a slate winner yesterday. So big game from Mikal. Josh Okogie closed over Dwayne Washington. That was a fairly big surprise. They went kind of a defense first. I think that was probably why. But Okogie played way more than I thought in this spot. But bringing back Landry Shamet, that should cut down Okogie a little bit. It cut down Washington quite a bit, and then takes ball handling away from Mikal. But maybe he doesn't play. But I would expect him to be out there.
I think with Dwayne Washington, who most people will focus on, he'll slide out of the starting lineup here. You can see the guy's just taking so many shots per minute that I think his bench role is probably going to be pretty safe at 22 to 26 minutes, something like that. And he's still going to get off 15 shots. So for a really cheap price tag, he's still going to be attractive. We should note, though, that they signed Saban Lee, which is another indication that that Chris Paul's probably not likely available now. You mentioned unlikely to kind of join them in the road trip. They do. This road trip extends. They
may join him later, but they wouldn't join this early, right? He would have just went with them for.
You would think so. But you never know. If they have a return date in mind, they might just fly the guy there ahead of time. But Minnesota and Memphis are the next 2 stops on this trip before they're home January 19th. So another week potentially if they didn't want him to join. We'll see. But hard leans on CP3 and 8. I do not expect to get this information until closer to the 3:30 injury report. 4:30 injury report would be my guess, somewhere around there, because they won't have to file until 1:00 of Eastern, the 1:00 Eastern, 1:00 of the local time of the area the game is being played. This is being played in Mountain Time, so I think the 3:30 injury report is where we'll probably get some more clarity.
Yeah, I feel like they're going to roll Chris Paul out, and I feel pretty good they might roll Ayton out. Shaman will get a Q tag though.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That will do it. Any other news that came in that we should touch on before we get out of here? Oh, Kevin Huerter.
Kevin Huerter. Yep.
Questionable with the illness. On Sacramento's injury report, before they had not filed anybody, so he's the only guy on it. Who would replace Kevin Huerter if he was unable to go tonight?
Should be TD2. They seem to like him quite a bit. They like Monk off the bench. So Terrence Davis 2 to the uninitiated on the nicknames. I would expect him to start. Malik Monk, we saw him miss a game over the weekend. Came back and looked great. He talked about getting the game off, revitalized him, and he felt great. He was really active with the ball. 6 assists, ran the offense a ton. But my God, just a A+ matchup. I believe my matchups column should be out. Shout out to Jackson, but there is a certain one who doesn't give a fox who has graced the cover of my matchups column today. I just love the matchup for him against these Rockets.
Yeah, and it could be interesting for Malik Monk as well if there's a little bit more of a minute ceiling of ball handlers and driving guards do really, really well against Houston. He would be able to do that, and then maybe also benefit from, if Houston's a non-competitive, Malik Monk could maybe play some minutes down the stretch. They did add some depth bringing in PJ Dozier, so they have a little bit more like blowout minutes depth. If Huerter were out, also if you think about kind of the role that Huerter does, it's a lot of spot up shooting. Who are their shooters as well? Well, Keegan Murray and Harrison Barnes would have a little bit more of a ceiling as well to their minutes. We would give most of Kevin Huerter's minutes to Terrence Davis, assuming he would slide into that starting rotation, but the ceilings improve for Malik Monk, Harrison Barnes, and Keegan Murray as well. And Keegan Murray, I'm still waiting for that Keegan Murray game. Right now, he's been relegated to like purely a spot up shooter. They don't really let him do much else with the ball.
It's a good matchup for, just to add a quick matchup note that you could talk about later for DFS and how to play it. The Houston defense has really changed a lot for how they're protecting the paint. They actually moved up a lot, and now they're ranked first in fewest points allowed around the basket, which is a synergy stat, and they've get blown away in the jump shooting stats. They keep climbing up. They passed the Knicks the other day. They've been giving up a lot of jumpers. So perimeter players have been lighting them up, which they've been doing for 2 years now. So it's not as great of a bonus spot as you would think, but that's why Fox is my cover boy. And as you mentioned, I think Keegan, if Huerter's out, that could really, really set him up. My guy.
Yeah. All right. That will do it for this edition of Established Run's NBA Injury Report Analysis Show. As always, please support the people who are supporting us. The show is brought to you by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. They have daily NBA snake drafts for money, running in addition to many formats of NFL playoff contests, whether it's the Gauntlet, the Mitten. You'll see me in the Gauntlet quite a bit these next few days. Still running for huge cash prizes. If you're playing NBA Pick'em, in-season subscribers can use our tool to compare ETR projections to their fantasy Pick'em games. If you haven't signed up for Underdog yet, use promo code ETR for a matching deposit bonus up to $100. That's promo code ETR at UnderdogFantasy.com. Okay, if you are interested in joining us on the premium side of things, we'll be behind the paywall at 5 o'clock Eastern today with myself and Gary Hartman breaking down this 8-game slate from a GPP perspective, talking about that big milli maker on DraftKings and how to best approach it. Make sure you can subscribe via the bundle packages if you want access to everything, via weekly packages, monthly packages if you just want to test us out on the DFS side. We've got prop stuff going as well. If you're uninterested in supporting us with your hard-earned dollars, we always ask you to support us with your hard-earned clicks. You can subscribe to this YouTube page, get notifications whenever we go live. You can also smash that like button and help circulate our content in the algorithm. As we always say, feed the algorithm, help us feed our families, and we'll help you feed yourselves in the props and DFS streets. Nom, 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 nom. We'll see you tomorrow.